Chapter 15:25 Go left. Chapter 15:25 Go left. Author's note. Unedited chapter, People of Earth. This is Commander Urgrel of the Tark's force. We apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. Gustav Crimson has informed us that he has been cleared of all charges. We are withdrawing our forces immediately. Thank you for your understanding. Back on Earth, the message was met with a collective sigh of relief. The tension that had gripped the planet began to ease, and the chaotic atmosphere started to calm. Gustav reappeared among his friends, who were waiting anxiously for his return. Is everything okay? Angie asked. Gustav smiled reassuringly. Yes, everything is fine. Commander Urgrel understands the situation now. The Tarks are withdrawing. Let out a low whistle. You sure know how to cause a ruckus, Gustav. Falco laughed, more like saving the day. As usual, as the sky cleared and the massive Tark ships began their retreat. After Tark forces had withdrawn, the Earth began to settle back into an uneasy calm. Gustav, his friends, and Commander Urgrel gathered in a serene park on the outskirts of the Elysium Prime City. The lush greenery and the gentle sound of a flowing stream were a relief to the sense as the earlier events slowly faded into obscurity. The group sat on benches arranged in a semicircle under a large, ancient tree whose branches spread wide, offering shade and a sense of security. The atmosphere was filled with a mixture of curiosity, relief, and a lingering sense of the extraordinary. Endrick, Falco, Eldris, Rhea, Angie, Matilda, Empress Daria, and Vera were all present. They had expressions of astonishment on their faces at this moment. They had just witnessed a Tark force commander who had threatened the entire Earth only minutes ago, now sitting calmly with them. Gustav introduced everyone formally to Commander Urgrel. Everyone, this is Commander Urgrel, the Tark force commander who helped me in the past. Urgrel, these are my closest friends and allies. Urgrel's presence radiated with a refined military demeanor that commanded respect. It was like standing before Grand Commander Cheyenne. However, he nodded to each of them with a look of humility as his armor glinted in the sunlight. His eyes held a depth of wisdom and experience. Falco was the first to speak. So, you were ready to take on the whole planet just to protect Gustav's. Urgrel's expression softened slightly as he looked at Gustav with something akin to reverence. Yes, Falco, Gustav, or, as we know him, the outworldly, is our savior and God. We would do everything in our power to protect him, even if it meant going against Earth. Angie looked between Gustav and Urgrel, her brows furrowed in thought. Why do you see him as your savior and God? Urgrel turned his gaze to her, his voice calm and steady. It is a long but well-known story that resulted in the salvation of our people. He is the reason for our evolution and rise to greatness. We owe him our lives and our future. Rhea, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. At least you guys are better than the Gustavo Alliance. They were more interested in conquering and subjugating planets. Urgrel nodded. We have no interest in taking over planets or causing harm. Our primary goal is the protection and preservation of our people, and those we consider allies. Endrick, who of course was still very familiar with the commander, leaned forward with a question. Commander Urgrel, has there been any news of the other time candidate returning? Urgrel shook his head solemnly. No, Endrick, the other time candidate has not been seen or heard from. Their whereabouts and actions remain a mystery. Falco, and the others exchanged puzzled glances, clearly intrigued by this mention of another time candidate. Gustav, sensing their curiosity, decided to explain. The other time candidate is someone I was told about during my time with the Tarks. Just like Endrick, he or she is linked to the fate of our universe and mine. They exist to guide and help with what is coming. Don't forget the advice, Savior, Commander Urgrel suddenly voiced out. Matilda had a look of confusion. What advice? She inquired. I was told to go left by the other time candidate, but I still don't understand what it means. I haven't come across any situation where that advice makes sense. Gustav recalled what Commander Urgrel had said to him before leaving with Endrick many months ago. Urgrel's eyes met Gustav's, filled with a calm certainty. Outworldly, the time will come when you will understand. When that moment arrives, you will know what to do. The advice to go left is significant and will reveal itself when you need it most. Angie placed a comforting hand on Gustav's shoulder. We'll be here to support no matter what happens. Gustav nodded. Thanks, Angie. Urgrel's voice turned serious as he addressed Gustav directly. Outworldly, remember that your journey is far from over. You must continue for the sake of our universe. Your actions and decisions are vital to the survival of countless lives. Gustav met Urgrel's gaze. I understand, Commander Urgrel. Back on planet Agon, I was supposed to use a warp demolator fragment to get to the stagnant Siderus void. Unfortunately, I had to come back to Earth after seeing a vision about Angie's appearance and the trouble you all got into when you went to save Rhea. A wave of seriousness washed over the group. Angie's eyes widened, and she instinctively reached out to grasp Gustav's hand. What exactly is the stagnant Siderus void? Angie's question broke the silence. Gustav realized he hadn't brought her up to speed on that yet. Only the boys were aware of most of his endeavors and plans that were put in place before Angie was saved. Gustav decided to give a brief explanation. The stagnant Siderus void is a location that only exists in the future. It's where the warp demolator has been dragging a lot of orbital bodies to. It's why planet Humbad can't be found in its original location within space. I need to get there to find planet Humbad. Matilda frowned, trying to piece together the information. So, what happens once you get to planet Humbad? Gustav's gaze turned distant as he envisioned the journey ahead. On planet Humbad, I need to locate a place called Dimension 6. I hope that there will be some type of answer waiting for me there. It's part of a larger puzzle I need to solve. The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air. Empress Daria looked at Gustav intently. What do you expect to find in Dimension 6? Gustav shook his head. I'm not entirely sure. It's more of a hope than a certainty. But all the signs point to it being crucial for understanding the origin of certain things and possibly finding a way to protect our universe. Rhea's voice was filled with concern as he asked, Can we come with you? Gustav's. Now that he knew there was another warp demolator that could be used, he wanted to help. I appreciate your willingness to help, but it's impossible. You know how dangerous the warp demolator is. I had to take tests that Miss Amy put in place for me and achieve the 3-in-1 golden body. Had I entered the warp demolator back then in space without achieving the 3-in-1 golden body, even with the sacred armor, it would have been my end. Matilda pressed further. Why can't we come along? We've faced plenty of danger before. Gustav's gaze hardened. Because you would all die if you did. The warp demolator will rip you to shreds from your body to your mind, and even your soul. It will leave nothing. Only someone with the 3-in-1 golden body can survive the journey. Angie's eyes were filled with worry as she squeezed his hand tighter. But you'll be alone. What if something happens to you? I've faced many dangers alone before. This is yet another thing I have to do by myself. But I promise I will come back. I have to. For all of you, Gustav vowed with a look of assuredness. Eldris nodded in understanding as he recalled nearly getting swallowed up by the warp demolator. If it wasn't for the strange whitish being that had saved them at the time, he was sure it would have been their end. It wasn't like they could really do anything about it. Gustav wouldn't allow them to make foolish decisions based on emotions. After all, what good were they to him dead? We get it, Gustav. Just be careful, Eldris stated. Sure thing. Nightfall had arrived and Commander Urgrel had left after passing some gifts to Gustav, one of which included a new spacecraft. At the moment, Gustav and Angie found themselves walking along a path lined with blooming flowers. Their hands were intertwined. The moon cast a silver glow over the surroundings, adding a touch of romantic magical to the atmosphere. Angie looked up at Gustav, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "When will you be leaving?" "About a week or two from now. I still need to put some things in place before leaving." Chapter 15:26, Let's Make a Baby. Chapter 15:26, Let's Make a Baby. Author's note. Do not unlock. Gustav stopped walking and turned to face her, while gently cupping her face in his hands. "I'm still here, and I'll spend most of my time here with you. I'll miss you so much," Angie muttered with a low tone, while kissing his hand in her face. "I'll miss you too, Angie, but everything will work out. I promise," he reassured her again. She leaned into his touch, her voice a whisper. "I know. Just be safe." He leaned forward to kiss her lips softly. "Oh, and when I come back, let's make a baby." Gustav's statement after withdrawing caused a deep shades of pink to appear on both Angie's cheeks. Wah! Her eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected Gustav to suddenly say this. "Gus, what brought this on?" she stammered as her heart pounded. Gustav smiled as a flirtatious glint appeared in his eye. "I'd just like to have a mini, both of us, before the world ends," he said playfully, his tone light yet sincere. Angie giggled in both embarrassment and happiness. "You're unbelievable, Gustav. But seriously, why now?" Gustav's expression softened as his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "Because I love you, Angie. No matter how uncertain the world may be, having a child together, it feels like the ultimate expression of that love." Angie's eyes shimmered as a smile spread across her face. "You really mean it, don't you?" Gustav nodded, his smile growing. "Absolutely. Just think about it. Little Angie Gustav running around, causing chaos with all that energy and charm. They won't have to ever experience what I did. They'll make sure of it." They both laughed, the sound mingling with the gentle rustling of the leaves. "I'd love that," Angie said softly, her eyes filled with emotion. "But let's make sure you come back safely first." "I will," Gustav promised, pulling her into a tender embrace. Their lips met in a kiss, filled with love and hope for what was to come in the future. While they displayed love for each other, a storm was silently brewing. As the days progressed, the group continued their vacation in Elysium Prime City, enjoying every moment of their time together. They engaged in various activities that strengthened their bond. One sunny afternoon, they found themselves at the city's renowned amusement park. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the exhilarating rush of roller coasters. E and Falco were first in line for the highest, fastest ride. These rides were tailor-made especially for mixed bloods, since normal fast rides could barely make them feel any rush. The fastest rides could rotate at very high speeds, which made it more enjoyable for mixed bloods, but who knew if it would be good enough for Gustav and the others? "Come on, Gustav," E called out, waving enthusiastically. "You can't miss this." Gustav laughed, shaking his head. "It's too slow." Angie, standing beside him, nudged him playfully. "You're not scared, are you?" "I need something much faster." "It is practically standing still." Gustav shook his head. He headed towards the operators and asked if the Ferris wheel could go any faster. "Are you mad, S?" One of the operators first yelled before raising his head to meet Gustav's face. He immediately froze in recognition. "Isn't that Gustav Crimson?" He stared at the 64 dirty blonde-haired and extremely charming figure before him. Sir, any faster would he endangering lives," the operator voiced respectfully. "Do it." Gustav handed the operator a transaction cube, "but make sure everyone else steers clear." Since Gustav had cleared his name, he had also regained possession of his bank accounts, which meant he currently had hundreds of millions, and was rich enough to buy out the amusement park for the rest of the day. Soon the Ferris wheel was cranked up to the highest speed and was rotating at a speed that made it look like a giant fan. "Whoever stays on that the longest gets to choose our next activity." Gustav pointed at the Ferris wheel, which was spinning at an insane rate. People had already cleared off the area at this moment, but were extremely shocked to see how fast it was moving. No one was aware that this was possible, and that was to be expected, since it was incredibly dangerous. "Aho, prepare to lose," Falco stated. "Nah, when I win, y'all better be ready to try space racing," E chimed in from the side. "None of you are beating me," Angie said confidently. "All words if you can't back it up with action." Matilda placed her hands on her waist with an assured smile. Gustav laughed lightly while shaking his head. "Well then, let's go." They all leapt forward in the next instant to land on one of the seats of the intensely spinning Ferris wheel. Their laughter seemed to echo endlessly as they enjoyed the blurring surroundings around them. The atmosphere was light and carefree compared to the weighty issues still brewing in the world outside. Meanwhile, global protests continued, albeit slightly diminished. The arrest of corrupt scientists, MBO officers, and government dignitaries had calmed some of the unrest, but the people were far from satisfied. They demanded assurances that such injustices would never happen again, their voices rising in unity for lasting change. In response, world leaders convened, desperate to find a solution that would restore public trust. After much deliberation, they made a historic proposition to invite Gustav Crimson to take a position as one of the world leaders. The announcement sent shockwaves across the globe. News channels buzzed with the unprecedented offer, debates erupted, and the world watched with bated breath to see how Gustav would respond. On the final day of their vacation, Gustav, Angie, and their friends sat together on the beach, watching the sun set over the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink. They really had a blast in Elysium Prime City. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. E was the first to break the silence, nudging Gustav. "Hey, man, have you noticed that the world leaders have been trying to contact you? They've been pretty persistent." Gustav sighed, leaning back on his hands and gazing out at the horizon. "Yeah, I've seen the messages. Honestly, I don't care." At that moment, Gustav's communicator beeped, signaling an incoming call. He glanced at the display and saw Commander Zenatus' name. With a sigh, he picked it up, knowing that he couldn't ignore this particular call. A holographic projection of Commander Zenatus appeared before them, his stern yet familiar face smiling warmly. "Gustav, it's good to see you," Zenatus began. Gustav smiled back. "Zenatus, it's been a while. How are things?" The commander chuckled. "Busy, as usual. But let's not talk about me. How's your vacation going?" "It's been great. Much needed after everything that's happened," Gustav replied, his friends nodding in agreement. E grinned and joined the conversation. "Hey, Commander Zenatus, how's it going? You keeping the MBO in line?" Zenatus laughed. "Doing my best. How's the beach treating you all?" Falco chimed in. "It's amazing here. We've had a blast." After a few more moments of catching up, Zenatus' expression turned serious. "Gustav, I need to inform you about something important. The world leaders have made a proposition. They want you to become one of them." Everyone fell silent, stunned by the revelation. Angie's eyes widened, and she looked at Gustav with an expression of astonishment. "Gustav, that's huge." Ria nodded in agreement. "I didn't see that coming, rival." Falco raised an eyebrow. "What's the catch?" Zenatus sighed. "There's no catch per SE. The leaders believe that having someone like Gustav in their ranks could bring about significant change. His actions have inspired people worldwide." Gustav shook his head with a resolute expression. "Am not interested in playing politics, Zenatus. I don't want to be a part of their games." Matilda leaned forward with a thoughtful gaze. Think about the benefits, Gustav. You could keep the government in check and ensure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Vera finally spoke after much silence. You don't have to do it. I think they're up to something. Empress Daria chimed in with a soft-spoken tone. Leadership is a heavy burden, but it's also a chance to shape the future. Consider it carefully. Gustav turned back to Xanatus after hearing the others speak. That's desperate. Even for them. Xanatus' hologram sighed deeply. There have been unrest and nonstop protests all across the world. People are demanding change, and the leaders are struggling to maintain order. They believe that once you become a part of them, this will stop. Also, since you're believed to be the world's strongest, become a world leader should give the planet a sort of unspoken blanket of protection. Angie squeezed Gustav's hand. Maybe this is the next step. I really don't have time for it. I have other things to do rather than have the world leaders at their pants. Chapter 1527, Getting the 5 Years Quest Reward. Chapter 1527, Getting the 5 Years Quest Reward Author's Note. Unedited chapter. This position is better off with someone who will actually be available. Gustav shook his head. When the thought about it, Gustav was right. Looking at the situation, the world leaders were definitely aware of this as well. However, if Gustav joined, it would be as though he was a part of them in name only. It would quell the unrest, while Gustav wouldn't have the time to really keep the government in check. It was a win-win for them. Will you refuse them? The world balance may fall apart, though. Eldris chipped in from the side. I'll think about it, Gustav finally said with a contemplative tone. Xanatus nodded with an expression of understanding. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your vacation. The holographic projection flickered and disappeared, leaving the group to digest the conversation. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a deep orange glow over the ocean. Well, that was intense. So, Gustav, world leader, huh? He said with a chuckle. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Gustav gave him a light slap at the back of his head. Falco grinned. Hey, if you become a world leader, does that mean we get special privileges? The place soon erupted with laughter as they kept talking about this all through the night. Gustav and the others finally returned to Plankton City the next day. As they made their way through the airport, a swarm of reporters descended upon them, eager to get a word from Gustav. Mr. Crimson, can you tell us if you're going to accept the position as a world leader? One reporter shouted as a floating mic hovered before him. How do you feel about the protests that have erupted worldwide? Another chimed in as camera lenses clicked incessantly. Gustav maintained his composure and ignored the barrage of questions without pausing. His friends formed a protective barrier around him, ensuring that the reporters couldn't get too close. Angie stayed particularly close with a straight expression. The group got into hover cars that was already waiting for them and waved each other goodbye. It was time for them all to get back to their families after the last week vacation. They would rendezvous later at East S Place. Besides Matilda and Empress Daria, Gustav and Endrick were the only ones who left together. They finally reached a luxurious penthouse Gustav had booked. Since he cleared his name, he hadn't returned to the MBO. The penthouse was spacious and elegantly furnished, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the cityscape. Soft lighting and minimalist decor added to the serene atmosphere, providing a perfect retreat from the chaos outside. Once inside, Gustav let out a deep sigh of relief. Finally away from all the pestering, he said while looking around the familiar surroundings. What do you intend to do now, big brother? Endrick inquired. Preparations. What about you? Gustav asked. Same. Over the next few days, Gustav found himself with much-needed solitude to plan for his upcoming trip to planet Argon. The world continued to buzz with speculation about whether he would accept the position of world leader, but Gustav focused on the task at hand. In the penthouse, Gustav gathered the sacred items currently in his possession: the void stepper boots, the ancient hourglass, and the sacred armor, which Endrick had finally handed to him. He wrapped a layer of compressive space around the armor to suppress the energy it was giving off. It was still a highly suff-about artifact, so he wouldn't want to attract unnecessary forces to this place. Cohelia, the living devourer, remained embedded in his left palm. This meant he had 4 out of 5 sacred treasures. Gustav sat cross-legged in the middle of his spacious living room, channeling his bloodline and taking stock of his abilities. He was acutely aware that he was still at the 4th step of beta rank, yet he currently held the title of World's Strongest. He had achieved this during the intense battle with Angie and Jack, but at the time didn't notice it because things were pretty intense. As he meditated, focusing on his internal energy and power, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he had come. The journey had been arduous, filled with challenges and trials, and yet he had successfully completed one out of the 5 years' quest. One evening, Gustav was checking his system stats. Host attributes: name, Gustav Crimson level, 210 class, transdimensional being EXP, 67-040-0-0/302-0000000 HP, 450-000/450-000 energy, 210-000/210-000 attributes: strength, 899 perception, 895 mental fortitude, 898 agility, 896 speed, 899 bravery, 897 intelligence, 895 charm, 411 defense, 898 vitality, 893 endurance, 896 attributes points, 127 underscore 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 underscore. Is there really no limit as to how powerful I can get from the system? Gustav thought about how he was already beyond level 200. Besides strength from all of his bloodlines, he also had strength from the system and then strength from being a cosmic superior being. It felt like he had limitless potential. Unfortunately, whether he had limitless potential or not, strength had to be cultivated. One couldn't just achieve the highest level with a snap of the fingers. Chaos wasn't going to wait for him to cultivate strength before it struck. So it didn't really matter that he could keep improving. What mattered the most right now was speed. As he reviewed his stats, a new system notification popped up, catching his attention. System notification: rewards for becoming the world's strongest, mixed blood. Issuing rewards. Gustav's eyes widened in anticipation as the notification continued. Congratulations, host. As the world's strongest mixed blood, you have unlocked the following rewards: cosmic insight, gain knowledge of otherworldly forces upon contact, level up times 3 plus 2 bloodlines unlock. System notification: since Shops has been sacrificed to attain system manifestation in the past, credits will be replaced with a different reward plus 2 skill evolution cards, plus 200 attribute points. Gustav felt a surge of energy course through him as the level up rewards took effect. Finally, the rewards are here, Gustav mumbled with a scrutinizing gaze. I was held up. The system voice rang in his mind. Held up with what? Gustav questioned with a suspicious tone. Fwye, a red light phased out of him in the next instant, and the system materialized in its usual teenage girl form. Origins. You're going to be discovering my origins soon, the system voiced. Activating cosmic insight. Gustav saw the notification appear before him after staring at the system's physical form. Archaic otherworldly artificial life form detected, drawing information from the Throxiac dimension created for the purpose of not now. The system suddenly retracted back into Gustav, causing the readings in his line of sight to stop. What the hell? Get back out here, Gustav voiced with a strong tone. No, not yet. You've been saying this for years. It's about time I figured out everything else you're hiding. You will but at least hold on till after you get back from the Sitter's Void. It will interfere with your mission. I highly doubt that. Your ass is not to be trusted. I'm telling you the truth. Your head has to be in the game. Things relating to me should only be secondary. How about you go fuck yourself? Gustav stated with a tone of annoyance. At that moment, Angie walked into the room. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Gustav answered with a nod. He still hadn't let Angie know that there was something living inside of him. The boys were already aware, but he didn't know how Angie would react if she found out that the something could become a girl. Who knew how she would take it? I heard you earlier. You sounded agitated. Angie sat beside him with a slightly worried look. No, I'm fine. Just preparing for the Argonne trip, Gustav said to her. Oh, all right. Mum said to ask if you were joining us for dinner, Angie inquired. Sure thing. Just let me brush things up here, he responded with a smile. Angie smiled back and gave him a kiss on his left cheek. See you soon, babe. After Angie stepped out, Gustav's face went back to a frown. Fuck you, he yelled internally. You'd break Angie's heart if you did that. Gustav rolled his eyes in response. He couldn't be bothered to reply. He stared at the 2 bloodlines he got from the reward. Primal Bond. Great bloodline that grants one the ability to boost the bloodline abilities of everyone around them based on the strength of their bond. Raw assimilation. A great bloodline that grants one the ability to merge with raw non-living matter. Gustav imagined the possibilities these 2 bloodlines presented. Primal Bond was particularly intriguing. The idea of enhancing the strength and abilities of his friends based on the depth of their bond was both powerful and meaningful. It would allow him to support his allies in ways he had never been able to before, strengthening their collective resolve and abilities during critical moments. Chapter 15:28 Dinner with Angie's Family. Chapter 15:28 Dinner with Angie's Family. Author's note. Unedited chapter, he turned his attention to raw assimilation. His genetic transformation bloodline already granted him an assimilation ability, but this one was fundamentally different. With genetic transformation, he could assimilate with living tissue, people, aliens, or organisms. However, raw assimilation opened up a realm of new possibilities. He could merge with non-living matter, potentially even something as vast as a moon or as powerful as a star. The idea was exhilarating, the potential applications endless. As Gustav considered these new bloodlines, his thoughts shifted to the 2 skill evolution cards he had also received as part of his rewards. He pondered which skills to evolve next, knowing that his choices could significantly impact his future capabilities. Before he could make a decision, he recalled the dinner he had agreed to have with Angie's family. Realizing the time, Gustav decided it was best to get ready. He headed to his bedroom, which was a minimal yet compact and cozy setup. He stepped into the ensuite bathroom to freshen up. The shower, with its multiple jets and rainfall feature, was a welcome respite. As the warm water cascaded over him, he allowed himself a moment to relax and clear his mind. Once freshened up, Gustav chose a casual yet stylish outfit. Dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored red jacket. He checked his reflection in the mirror, ensuring he looked presentable for dinner. Satisfied, he made his way to the living room, where he grabbed his keys and phone. Before leaving, he sent a quick message to Angie, heading out now. See you soon. A few moments later, his phone beeped with Angie's reply. Can't wait. Moi. Gustav smiled and pocketed the device as he stepped towards the balcony area. It would seem that his location had been revealed, so the press was cooped up at the entry point of the skyscraper. The world before him came to a pause as Gustav moved, leapt into the air, and vanished. Gustav stood outside Angie's apartment building with some flowers in his grasp and a slight smile playing on his lips. As he walked up to the apartment door, it swung open to reveal Mr. and Mrs. Villandrobadia. Mrs. Villandrobadia displayed a welcoming smile. "Good evening, Gustav," Mrs. Villandrobadia greeted warmly. "We're so glad you could join us tonight." Mr. Villandrobadia extended his hand. "It's good to see you again, Gustav. Come in, make yourself at home." Gustav shook his hand and stepped inside. "Thank you for having me." The apartment was cozy and inviting, with family holographic photos adorning a side of the wall and the scent of a delicious meal wafting through the air. The dining table was set with elegant dishware, and a variety of mouth-watering dishes were spread out, indicating the effort the family had put into the evening. As they moved into the living room, Gustav noticed Phil, Angie's little brother. Phil was no longer the small boy Gustav remembered. Despite being 15, he was almost fully grown, with a build that hinted at his future strength. "Hey, Phil," Gustav greeted with a nod, genuinely surprised by his growth. "You've grown a lot since I last saw you." Phil smiled shyly, his voice deeper than before. "Hey, Gustav. Yeah, it's been a while." Angie appeared, a radiant smile on her face as she walked over to Gustav and linked her arm through his. "Come on, everyone, let's sit down for dinner." They all gathered around the table, as the atmosphere was filled with warmth. The meal was a delightful affair, with an array of flavors that showcased Mrs. Villandrobadia's culinary skills. Gustav tried not to compare her cooking to that of Boss Danzo, since he made a habit of doing that for every meal he had. As they ate, they chatted and reminisced about the past, sharing stories and laughter that bridged the time and experiences they had missed. They remembered how things used to be much simpler back in their previous neighborhood before Gustav and Angie joined the MBO. Mr. Villandrobadia recounted an amusing tale from Angie's childhood, causing everyone to laugh. "Remember the time Angie tried to build a rocket in the backyard? She was so determined to reach the stars." Angie groaned, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Dad, not that story again." Gustav chuckled, his heart warming at the familial banter. "I'd love to hear more about Angie's childhood adventures." Mrs. Villandrobadia smiled. "She was always so fearless, much like she is now." After the meal, as they moved to the living room for dessert, Mr. and Mrs. Villandrobadia grew more serious. Mr. Villandrobadia cleared his throat and looked at Gustav with sincerity. "Gustav, there's something we need to say," he began. "When Angie disappeared, we were devastated. We were angry and scared, and we took a lot of that out on you. We were wrong." Mrs. Villandrobadia nodded with a remorseful look. "We're so sorry for how we treated you, Gustav. Thank you for saving our daughter. You don't need to apologize. I made a promise to protect Angie, and I failed. I can't blame any of you, but I'll make sure to keep that promise in the future." Mr. Villandrobadia's voice was filled with emotions. "Thank you, Gustav. You've done more for our family than we can ever repay." Phil, who had been silent, spoke up. "Gustav, can I talk to you outside for a moment?" Gustav nodded, standing up. "Of course." They stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Phil looked at Gustav with a serious look. "I need to apologize too," Phil began, his voice trembling slightly. "For the longest time, I hated you. When Angie was missing, I hated myself for looking up to you. I blamed you for everything." Gustav remained silent, giving Phil the space to express his feelings. Phil continued, his eyes filled with regret. "When Angie returned and told us what happened, how you sacrificed yourself to save her, I realized how stupid I'd been. You must love her just like we do, maybe even more. When she was lost, you must have been hurt too, right?" Gustav placed a reassuring hand on Phil's shoulder. "I was, Phil, but what matters is that Angie is safe now. And that's all I care about." Tears welled up in Phil's eyes as he looked at Gustav. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Thank you for saving my sister." Gustav smiled gently, patting Phil's back. Don't worry about it. We all went through a lot. What's important is how it turned out. Phil wiped his eyes, his voice breaking. Thank you, Big Brother Gustav. Really? They stood there for a moment in silence, staring into the distance with smiles on their faces. After a while, Angie appeared at the door, a soft smile on her face. Everything okay out here? She asked. Phil nodded with red eyes but a lighter expression. Yeah, thanks, Big Brother Gustav. It was obvious that he'd been carrying a weight of guilt all this time, and now that he had gotten it off his chest, he felt better. He headed back inside, leaving Gustav and Angie alone. She walked up to him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. Thank you for talking to him, she said softly. Phil led a campaign when you were still unconscious and in custody before your trial. He rallied so many people trying to get justice for you. Gustav raised an eyebrow. Impressed? Really? Phil did that? Angie nodded. He looks up to you, Gustav. Even when he was angry, he still admired you. And when he realized how much you cared for me and put yourself on the line to save me, it made him want to fight for you. He's a good kid. You've got a great family, Angie. Gustav had a brief recollection of everything that happened when Angie was missing. Angie wrapped her arms around him while resting her head on his chest. As do you, because you're our family too. We're so lucky to have you, Gus. Gustav held her close, feeling the warmth of her embrace. Perhaps in the lucky one. About a day later, Gustav sat in the living area of his luxurious penthouse. The evening was calm, but inside his mind, a storm of decisions brewed. He leaned back into the plush leather sofa, his thoughts fixated on the 2-skill evolution cards. These cards were potent, capable of transforming his abilities into something far more powerful and versatile. He brought up his system skills and abilities collection, causing a holographic panel to materialize before him. The list was long, over 200 skills and abilities which he had acquired over the years. However, only the skills that were maxed out could be evolved, and that narrowed his choices down to a handful of his most critical abilities. Skills and abilities: Lightning Blitz level 7, Sprint level max, Chop level max, Slash level max, God Eyes level max, Flight level 8, Combination level max, Super Jump level max, Strength Boost level 9, Bloodline Acquisition level max, Bloodline Hold level 8, Bloodline Transfer level max, Palm Strike level max, Silent Advancement level max, Energy Discharge level max, Miniature, Black Hole level 5, Recreation level max, Toxin Immunity level max. Chapter 15:29 Testing out the Evolved Acquisition. Chapter 15:29 Testing out the Evolved Acquisition. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav stared at the list, and after many seconds, his eyes lingered on Bloodline Acquisition. He had used this ability countless times to gain new bloodlines, but he hadn't used it quite some time. It had been instrumental in his growth, allowing him to steal the abilities of others. But the idea of evolving it intrigued him. What could it become? How much more powerful could it make him? Bloodline Acquisition, Gustav muttered to himself, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. It's been one of my cornerstone abilities. If I evolve it, what new possibilities will it unlock? After a few more moments of contemplation, he made up his mind. Host has decided to use skill evolution card, evolving Bloodline Acquisition. 1/100%. The panel began to glow brightly as the evolution process started. Gustav watched, his anticipation growing with each passing second. The percentage climbed steadily, and he could feel the air around him thrumming with energy. As the evolution reached completion, the panel flashed a final message. Evolution complete. Bloodline Acquisition skill has been evolved into acquisition. Gustav quickly checked the details of his newly evolved skill. Acquisition, level 1. Ability to extract the bloodlines and core supernatural strength of mixed bloods and aliens. ability to isolate specific abilities and extract them, ability to steal the supernatural abilities of everyone and anyone within a range of 2,000 feet and use it as your own for a specific amount of time. Gustav's eyes widened as he read the information. The new skill was far beyond what he had imagined. The ability to extract abilities of everyone around him and use them within such a vast range was a game changer. He could effectively neutralize any threat within a 2,000-foot radius and turn their strengths against them. If it was this mouth gaping at level 1, how powerful would it be when it increased in levels? This is incredible, Gustav muttered, leaning back against the sofa, trying to absorb the implications. I can not only extract bloodlines, but also isolate specific abilities to extract instead of taking the whole bloodline. I can also steal everyone's abilities around me and use them temporarily. This gives me an edge in almost any situation. He stood up, pacing the room as he thought it through. In a battle, I can disable my opponent's powers and use them myself. This can turn the tide of any fight, especially if I'm outnumbered or facing particularly powerful foes. Gustav looked out the window with a thoughtful gaze. The evolution of this skill was not just an enhancement of his abilities. It was a leap into a new realm of potential. I need to test this, he thought out loud. The possibilities were endless, but he knew he had to approach this with caution. The ability to steal abilities of everyone within a 2,000 feet radius was potent, but it also came with risks. What if he absorbed multiple abilities that were related to transformation? Could he transform into multiple forms at a time? Or would the power just be stored in him in the meantime until he decided on whether or not to activate it? He leaned towards the later, but even with he was still curious. Taking the abilities of everyone in the surroundings was only temporary and would be returned back to them after a specific amount of time. He needed to know how much time he would have after doing that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the cityscape, Gustav transformed into a darker version of himself while changing a few facial features. He didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to himself. After that, he leaped off the balcony, descending swiftly towards a lower, less populated part of the city. He landed softly in a deserted field with a still and quiet air. The field was surrounded by a mix of residential and commercial buildings, a perfect location for his test. Acquisition has been activated. The notification appeared in his line of sight, and Gustav immediately focused his will, commanding the bloodline abilities of everyone within a 2,000-foot radius to be drawn to him. Almost instantly, he felt a surge of energy as a glowing aura enveloping his being. At the same moment, a chorus of gasps and murmurs of disbelief echoed from the surrounding buildings and streets. What's happening? My bloodline. I can't sense it. I feel so weak. Gustav could hear the panic in their voices, but he remained focused, absorbing the newfound abilities. He could feel the strength of dozens of mixed bloods coursing through him, each power adding to his own. They were not in any way tampered with, remaining at the same level the original mixed blood had developed it to. This is incredible, Gustav muttered. He looked around the empty field, contemplating how to test these abilities. Let's start simple. He raised his hand, summoning a bolt of lightning from the sky, a bloodline he had just acquired. The lightning struck the ground with a deafening crack, leaving a smoldering crater. Next, he focused on another ability, feeling the ground beneath him shift. With a mere thought, he lifted a large chunk of earth, shaping it into a protective barrier. Earth manipulation. He mused, examining the solid wall he had created. 1:30. He took note of the countdown in his line of sight, reminding him of the limited time he had with these abilities. Gustav decided to push further, testing as many skills as he could. He closed his eyes and focused on the next ability. His body shimmered and disappeared, reappearing a moment later, several feet away. Spatial movement. He turned into a beast covered in flames and even created a vortex of wind and fire. He manipulated glass in the surroundings, turning them to different intricate shapes. He even tested out a blood-related ability. As the timer reached its final seconds, Gustav gently lowered himself back to the ground, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He had tested a wide range of abilities and understood the immense power of acquisition. Midnight, in an instant, the aura around him faded, and he felt the abilities leaving his body, returning to their rightful owners. The field around him was suddenly filled with cries of relief and confusion as mixed bloods regained their powers. What was that? I've got my powers back. Did anyone else feel that? Gustav had a thoughtful expression on his face. He had witnessed the potential chaos that acquisition could cause, but he also recognized the immense tactical advantage it provided. He started walking back towards his penthouse as his mind got filled millions of strategic ways he could make use of it. As he moved through the now bustling streets, he overheard snippets of conversations, people still reeling from the temporary loss of their abilities. I swear, my powers were just gone. It felt like something was pulling them out of me. Do you think it's a new enemy? Gustav smiled to himself, knowing that he had caused quite a stir. As he approached his penthouse, he couldn't help but reflect on the test. I need to keep it hidden. It could really come in handy, so long as enemies are taken unaware by it. Gustav sat in his penthouse, contemplating which ability to enhance next. His skill collection was vast, each with its own unique advantages, making the decision even more challenging. Maybe he'll decide later, he muttered to himself. The holographic TV flickered on, casting a soft blue glow across the room. The news channel was reporting on the latest global events, from political upheavals to technological advancements. Endrick glanced over. Still thinking about your decision? Not really. I don't think I'll be doing it. Gustav shook his head. Before Endrick could respond, Gustav sensed someone approaching the door. No, not just one person, two. The air outside seemed to shift with their presence, and a moment later, there was a knock. Gustav rose to his feet as his expression hardened. I'll get it. He headed to the door in the next instant. He wasn't willing to invite whoever it was into his home. He opened the door and stepped outside, immediately recognizing the two figures before him. The gravity of their presence was immediately apparent. They radiated the power and authority typical of Alfranked mixed bloods. They were world leaders. The one on the left was a tall man with graying hair. His posture was straight, and his piercing azure eyes conveyed both intelligence and determination. He wore a flowing dark green robe that shimmered slightly in the fading daylight, the intricate gold embroidery along the hem and sleeves adding a touch of dignifying elegance. The robe was belted at the waist with a finely crafted leather belt, adorned with a large, polished emerald that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Beside him stood the other, a woman with sharp features and green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her dark hair was pulled back into an elegant updo, and she wore a flowing midnight blue gown that complemented her commanding presence. Chapter 1530, is this your answer? Chapter 1530, is this your answer? Author's note. Unedited chapter. The woman's gown was made of a silky, almost iridescent fabric that caught the light with every movement, creating a mesmerizing effect. Silver patterns, resembling constellations, were woven into the fabric, giving her an almost celestial appearance. Around her neck hung a pendant with a deep blue sapphire, its depth matching the intensity of her gaze. Gustav's eyes narrowed as he regarded them coldly. "What do you want?" he asked with an icy tone. The man spoke first. "Gustav, we've come to discuss the offer to join us as a world leader. Your influence and power could help stabilize the current unrest." Gustav crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I've already made it clear that I'm not interested in a position I can't commit to. I won't be around to serve properly. The female world leader stepped forward. The world is on the brink of chaos, Gustav. Your presence could bring the order we desperately need. Gustav's patience was wearing thin. I don't care about your politics or your power struggles. If that's all you came to say, you can leave the way you came. The leaders exchanged glances, clearly not willing to give up so easily. Please, Gustav, the woman pleaded. Consider the impact you could have. A lot of people now look up to you. They trust you. Gustav smirked as a dangerous glint appeared in his eye. I have a proposition for you. It's the only one you'll be getting from me. If you don't agree to it, we have nothing more to talk about. The leaders looked intrigued, though wary. What is this proposition? The man asked. You'll hear about it at the press meeting, Gustav replied, his tone final. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to. Without waiting for a response, Gustav turned and headed toward the entrance of the skyscraper. The leaders followed at a distance, clearly unsettled by his abrupt dismissal. As he approached the ground floor, the noise from outside grew louder. The press and media were still gathered in droves. Their cameras and microphones were ready to capture any statement he made. Gustav stepped outside as the cool evening air sharp breezed by, and the surroundings were filled with the clamor of the reporters. The moment he appeared, the crowd erupted with questions. Gustav, are you considering the offer to become a world leader? What's your response to the current global unrest? Can you give us any insight into your future plans? Gustav raised a hand, signaling for silence. The reporters quieted, their eyes trained on him, eager for his words. I understand there's a lot of speculation about my role in the future, Gustav began, his voice steady and commanding. I have no interest in becoming a world leader. I cannot serve in a position that requires my constant presence when I have other responsibilities. The crowd murmured, but Gustav continued. However, I do have a proposition for the current world leaders, one that I believe could address the issues we're facing more effectively than a simple title change. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every word. The two leaders who had approached him earlier watched from the side, their expressions tense. What is this proposition? A reporter asked, his voice cutting through the murmur. Gustav's eyes scanned the crowd, his gaze intense. I propose the creation of an independent council composed of the most capable and trustworthy individuals from various fields, science, medicine, defense, and yes, law enforcement. This council would work together to address global issues, free from political agendas and corruption. They will have the power to sanction the world government and any other authoritative agencies all across the world for any wrong actions. The reporters were stunned into silence for a moment before the questions began to fly. Who would be on this council? How would they be selected? Would you lead this council? Gustav raised his hand again, quieting them. The council members would be selected based on their expertise and integrity. They would be individuals who have proven themselves through their actions, not their words. I won't necessarily claim leadership of the council. However, I will work together with the members, and the council will directly answer to me. They will carry on with their duties even when I am not present on Earth. The male world leader from earlier stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. And how do you propose we go about establishing this council? Gustav looked at him with a faint smirk. That's for the people to decide. I've given you the idea. If you truly care about stabilizing the world, you'll find a way to make it happen. After the world leaders agree to this, the people will decide on their candidates. Is this your answer? Gustav crimsoned? There was a tense silence as the leaders processed his words. The female leader finally spoke with a thoughtful gaze. It's a bold idea, Gustav, one that could indeed make a difference. Gustav nodded. Bold actions are needed in bold times. If you agree to this, I'll lend my support and help where I can. But if you continue to play politics, you'll find no ally in me. The crowd buzzed with renewed energy as the implications of Gustav's proposition sunk in. The two leaders present conferred, quietly for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Well, consider it, Gustav," the man said finally. "Thank you for your time." Gustav nodded, turning back to the press. "That's all for now. I have preparations to make." With that, he stepped back into the skyscraper as the doors slid shut behind him. Endrik was waiting for him in the living room, a curious look on his face. "What happened out there?" Gustav shrugged, sitting down beside him. "I propose the creation of an independent council to address global issues. This independent council will be above the world leaders and every authority on Earth. Now, let's see if they have the guts to follow through." Endrik chuckled, shaking his head. "You really gave them a lot to think about." Gustav smirked. "I had to do it in front of the press to give them little chances of refusal." The morning after Gustav's public proposal, the world was abuzz with conversation and speculation. News outlets and social media platforms were flooded with discussions about his proposition. Headlines screamed the news from every corner of the globe. Gustav Crimson proposes independent council to oversee government decisions and address global issues. Will world leaders accept Gustav's bold plan? Public support surges for independent council. In every city, people gathered to talk about Gustav's idea. From cafes to markets, the consensus was clear. If the world government truly cared about the people, they would accept Gustav's proposal. "The man's got a point," said an elderly gentleman in a popular pub. "Politics as usual isn't working. Maybe it's time we tried something different." "I agree," responded a young woman sipping her coffee in a New York City diner. "Gustav's idea of an independent council makes sense. We need leaders who care more about people than power." The protests, which had already been simmering, gained new momentum. Crowds of demonstrators carried signs that read, "Support the council," and "Listen to Gustav." The pressure on world leaders was mounting, and they knew they had to respond. In government buildings across the globe, high-ranking officials held frantic meetings. The tension was high as they debated the merits and risks of Gustav's proposal. "This is unprecedented," said one leader, pounding his fist on the table. "We can't just hand over power to a 21-year-old. "But look at the state of the world," countered another. "If we don't act, we risk losing everything. The people are with him. They trust him." Voices rose and fell in heated arguments. Some leaders were adamantly against the idea, unwilling to relinquish their control. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, argued for change. "Think about it," urged a young diplomat. "If we show that we're willing to listen to the people and take bold steps, we could regain their trust. This could be the fresh start we need." After 3 days of intense deliberation, the world government made a historic decision. They would accept Gustav's proposal and establish the independent council. The announcement was met with widespread relief and cautious optimism. Gustav was just 2 days away from his planned departure for Agon when he received the news. He knew he had to postpone his trip to help set up the council. He couldn't just leave it in the hands of anyone. That evening, Gustav addressed the world once more. "Thank you for your support and trust," he began. "We have a unique opportunity to reshape our world, to create a system that truly serves the people. The people will select individuals of integrity and expertise to form this independent council." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Gustav employed the help of EB and the others to set up an online platform where people could nominate and vote for candidates. They encouraged everyone to participate, emphasizing the importance of choosing individuals who embodied the values of humanity, compassion, and expertise in their respective fields. Chapter 1531, Independent Council successfully formed. Chapter 1531, Independent Council successfully formed. Author's note. Unedited chapter in cities around the world. People gathered in community centers, schools, and libraries discussing potential candidates and casting their votes. The energy was electric. a sense of hope and possibility infusing the air. Gustav sat in his penthouse, the holographic interface before him displaying a live feed of the nominations and votes. He and the team he had set up pored over the data, identifying individuals who received strong public support. "Look at this," said one of his advisors, pointing to a name on the screen. Dr. Patel Martinez, a leading expert in renewable energy. "She's been nominated by thousands of people. She seems like the kind of person we need," Gustav agreed. "Let's add her to the shortlist, but I'll interrogate her myself later." As the days passed, the shortlist grew longer. There were doctors, scientists, educators, social workers, and activists from all corners of the globe. Each had a proven track record of dedication and service to humanity. To E.E.'s surprise, he was also included in the list. He didn't expect it, but he already had a lot of votes from people, which quite surprised him, as he didn't deem himself popular. What E.E. didn't count was the many missions he had gone on, and how he usually engaged people in conversations. He was always heartily willing to help others, and a lot of people both within and outside the MBO knew how easygoing he was. One evening, Gustav sat down with Endrik and E.E. to review the final list of potential council members. "These are some incredible people," E.E. remarked while scrolling through the list. "It's amazing to see how many talented and compassionate individuals are out there." Gustav nodded. "Unlike myself, this council has to be made up of people who genuinely want to make a difference." The next day, Gustav stood in the grand hall of the temporary headquarters for the newly formed independent council. The room was spacious and modern, filled with natural light streaming through large windows. The atmosphere was a bit tense as the final round of candidate interviews was about to begin. He was flanked by a team of advisors, each one meticulously selected for their expertise in various fields. They had spent days sifting through the nominations, narrowing down the list to the most promising individuals. Today, Gustav would use his keen perception and ability to read others to interrogate the remaining candidates and finalize the council. As the first candidate stepped forward, Gustav gave a reassuring nod to his team. "Let's get started," he said with a calm but authoritative tone. The candidate was a middle-aged woman with a background in environmental science. She introduced herself confidently, her passion for sustainable development evident in her every word. Gustav listened intently, his sharp eyes catching every nuance of her demeanor. "Dr. Patel, what do you see as the biggest challenge in implementing a mandate that wouldn't discriminate against those with low-graded bloodline that have the capacity to work well in such fields?" Gustav asked, leaning forward slightly. Dr. Patel took a deep breath before answering. "The biggest challenge will be the political will and how to keep them safe when they engage in such energy research. The government might still be against it, so it will definitely require a lot of convincing to pass the bill. But I believe that's why we're here. We can really be the ones to make a difference." Gustav nodded, pleased with her answer. He could sense her sincerity and commitment. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. We'll be in touch." The next candidate was a young social worker named Aisha Kamara, who had been instrumental in several grassroots movements for education reform. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she spoke. "Gustav, I believe education is a major key to implementing and breaking a long cycle of unwarranted biases," Aisha said passionately. "If we can ensure that the children mentality is correct before they grow, we can avoid a lot of situations currently at play now. We can transform communities from the ground up, since the society plays a huge part in grooming the personality of a child." Gustav smiled. "I agree, Aisha. What specific policies would you propose to make this a reality?" Aisha outlined a detailed plan, focusing on careful implemented teacher training and community involvement. One by one, the candidates came forward, each bringing their unique perspectives and expertise. Gustav's high perception allowed him to discern their true intentions, picking up on subtle cues that revealed their character. He weeded out those who seemed more interested in power than in serving the people, focusing instead on those whose hearts were truly in the right place. Among the candidates was E. Of course. He didn't need to interrogate E.B. He knew exactly where his friend stood. E.'s sense of justice and unwavering loyalty made him an obvious choice for the council. No matter how biased it may seem, Gustav wanted someone from his friend group to be amongst the candidates. If E. hadn't made the cut originally, he would have put Eldris in. After hours of rigorous interviews, Gustav and his team had their final list, 30 council members, each one vetted and chosen for their dedication, integrity, and expertise. Gustav stood before the gathered candidates. Congratulations to each of you. You have been chosen not just for your skills, but for your commitment to changing the world. Together, we will usher in a new era. The news of the council members' selection spread like wildfire. Media outlets around the globe reported on the historic event, highlighting the diverse backgrounds and expertise of the chosen individuals. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, with people expressing renewed hope for the future. The Grand Hall was soon packed with journalists and cameras ready to broadcast the council members' first public appearance. Gustav stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of eager faces. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the members of the Independent Council, he began. Each of these individuals has been chosen for their dedication to justice, equality, and progress. They will be the voice of the voiceless, working tirelessly to address the challenges we face. One by one, the council members stepped forward to give their speeches. Dr. Patel was the first. We stand at a critical juncture in history. We are committed to pushing for the political will necessary to make changes where anyone can pursue research related to scientific and energy experimentations. Aisha Kamara followed, her eyes shining with determination. Education is the foundation of a prosperous society. We will work to ensure that every child, regardless of their background, has access to everything they should. We will break the cycle of discrimination and unwarranted treatments and empower communities to thrive together. E. took the podium next, his presence commanding and resolute. Corruption and inequality have plagued our world for far too long. We will clamp down on the societal differences between low and high-graded mixed bloods. We will eradicate corruption in government and ensure that no one is silenced or unjustly persecuted. The speeches continued, each council member articulating their vision and commitment. As the last speech concluded, Gustav returned to the podium. This council represents a new beginning. We will work together to address the pressing issues of our time and build a future where justice, equality, and progress are the norm. Thank you for your support. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the Grand Hall. The world was watching, and the message was clear: change was coming. Over the next few days, the council members began their work in earnest. Meetings were held to outline their initial priorities, and subcommittees were formed to tackle specific issues. Gustav juggled his responsibilities with preparing for his postponed trip to Argonne. Once he had finished putting a couple of things in place, he would leave everything to the others and finally head for Argonne. Can you believe how far we've come? E. asked with a smile. From fighting our way through battles to now shaping the future of the world, Gustav nodded. It's surreal, although I don't care much for it. So you really have a lot of work ahead of you. As do you, get back in one piece. In fact, they'll be heading to Argonne with you, and you cannot refuse. E. chuckled. The world is finally heading in the right direction, he added. Let's see if it survives long enough to become something. Better, Gustav voiced with a straight look. Days later in Plankton City, a battle was ongoing between two powerful forces. Boom, boom, boom. They met in midair multiple times with thunderous clashes. The force of their blow caused a shockwave that rippled through the atmosphere, shaking the nearby buildings. They landed on the rooftop of a deserted skyscraper. the ground beneath them cracking from the impact. Without a word, they continued exchanging powerful blows as their fists collided with enough force to create sonic booms. Chapter 1532, Leaving for Argon. Chapter 1532, Leaving for Argon, author's note. Unedited chapter. The air around them seemed to tremble with each strike, and the ground beneath crumbled further. Not bad, Gustav, Jack grunted, his eyes gleaming with respect. You've truly gotten way stronger. Gustav smirked, dodging a particularly fierce punch. I had to, didn't I? With a mutual understanding, they launched themselves into the sky, heading for outer space where they could unleash their full strength without causing undue destruction on Earth. As they ascended, the city lights below them grew distant, replaced by the vast expanse of stars. In the weightlessness of space, they continued their battle. Their blows caused ripples in the fabric of the cosmos. Their physical strength alone was immense, each punch sending shockwaves that traveled across the void. They refrained from using any supernatural abilities, relying solely on their raw power. Let's see if you can keep up, Jack said, his voice in challenge as though he hadn't accepted the fact that Gustav was now the world's strongest. Gustav responded with a powerful right hook, sending Jack hurtling through space. Jack quickly recovered, charging back with equal force. They collided again, the impact causing a nearby star to shatter into fragments. Its light got extinguished in an instant. For what felt like hours, they battled relentlessly, neither gaining a clear advantage. Their physical strength seemed evenly matched. Finally, as they hovered amidst the wreckage of the destroyed star, Jack raised a hand. All right, Gustav, I acknowledge your strength. You're the real deal. Gustav nodded with a steady breathe despite the intensity of their fight. Thanks, Jack. They returned to Earth, landing back on the rooftop where their battle had begun. The night was still, the city below unaware of the epic clash that had just taken place above them. Jack leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. You've come a long way, Gustav. Although, I'd still like to say I'm stronger because I can sense you're not even an alpha-ranked mixed blood. Yet, I know you have abilities that could make anyone unable to move a muscle. Gustav pulled a small rounded button from his storage space and handed it to Jack. There's something you need to have. Jack took the button, examining it curiously. What's this? It's a data storage button, Gustav explained. Everything I've discovered so far about the Dark Plane, the Death Angels, and other things is stored within. I don't know when it'll return from the stagnant, sider's void, and I need to bring everyone up to speed on things I know. You all need to be prepared. Jack's expression grew serious as he kept the button away. I will make sure we are. Gustav nodded with a look of relief. They stood in silence for a moment before Jack finally broke the silence. How do you feel about everything that's happened recently? The council, the new responsibilities? It's a lot, but I've played my part and left the rest in the hands of trusted allies and subordinates. I leave for planet Argon tomorrow, Gustav replied with a firm tone. Jack nodded thoughtfully. It'll hold things down while you're away. As the events surrounding Gustav settled, it was finally time for him to head back to Argon. This time, his closest friends and allies, Eldris, Falco, Angie, Endrick, and even Vera, decided to accompany him. Matilda had left already with Empress Daria, so they were unable to come with. They all gathered at the spaceship port where Gustav's spacecraft was parked. You know, you guys really don't have to, right? Gustav turned to stare at everyone while rolling his eyes. He grinned and patted Gustav on the back. Last time we let you face this alone, you ended up being unconscious for nearly 2 months. Let's go. Eldris nodded, his eyes serious. We're not backing out. Falco added. Besides, we have to keep an eye on you and make sure you don't get into trouble without us. Angie smiled softly in response. Her horns had regrown to their full length at this point. She was back to full power, so she was ready for anything. Endrick, standing off to the side, gave a brief nod. Let's get this over with. With everyone aboard, the spaceship powered up, and they left Earth, heading towards Argon. Upon arrival at Argon, they were greeted by Ethereal, the ethereal guardian who had guided Gustav before. "Welcome back, Gustav," Ethereal said, her voice like a gentle breeze. "And welcome to your companions. Please follow me." They were led through the intricate and beautiful pathways of Argon, causing surprised gasps to escape the lips of the others hadn't been here before. The skies were a stunning teal, with clouds that looked like they were made of pure light. The landscape was dotted with crystalline structures and lush greenery that twinkled purely. Finally, they arrived at the grand chamber where Gustav had trained his three in one golden body. Miss Amy's projection awaited. In the center stood the holographic figure of Miss Amy, her presence as serene and commanding as ever. "Welcome back, kiddo," Miss Amy's projection said. "Are you prepared?" Gustav stepped forward with a resolute expression. "Miss Amy, I am prepared." Miss Amy's projection smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "You have grown so much, kid. Very well. Get ready to use the warp demolator." Gustav nodded while cladding himself with his sacred armor. The intricate, shimmering plates formed around his body, providing both protection and enhancing his abilities. He gave off a thrumming force that caused waves of disturbance across space. The void-stepping boots materialized in his grasp, and he proceeded to wear them as well. Ethereal led Gustav to a containment area that was heavily fortified and surrounded by intricate sigils and runes. In the center of this area was a pedestal, and on it rested the fragment of the warp demolator. The fragment was contained within a glowing, translucent field that seemed to buzz with immense power. Miss Amy's projection appeared beside Gustav. "It is time." Gustav stepped forward and grabbed the containment before lifting it and heading out. He soon stood before everyone as the containment field of the warp demolator pulsated with an intense energy. They had all gathered on a plateau overlooking the vast, crystalline landscape of Argon. Their faces were filled with mixed expressions because they knew this moment marked the beginning of a perilous journey for Gustav. Gustav turned to his friends, his eyes reflecting both determination and gratitude. "Thank you all for being here. I don't know when I'll be back, but I promise to return. Take care of each other." E.E. stepped forward as his usual grin was replaced with a serious expression. "You'd better come back, Gus. We're counting on you." Eldris placed a hand on Gustav's shoulder. "Stay strong, and remember, we're always with you." Falco nodded solemnly. "You just do your thing. It'll keep the others safe." Angie's eyes were filled with sadness. "Be safe." She proceeded to hug him. "Big brother, I've put an extra layer of protection around you. I can't try to see into the fates in order not to risk anything bad happening. So you have to be careful." Enrique cautioned with a look of concern. "I'll try. No need to worry about me." Gustav ruffled his hair with a smile. Gustav proceeded to give them all one last look. "Goodbye, everyone." With that, Gustav lifted the containment field higher as the immense power made the air around him vibrate. He ascended into the sky, causing the containment to glow brighter as he rose higher, leaving the planet's surface behind. His friends watched in silence, their hearts heavy but hopeful. As he reached the edge of Argon's atmosphere, Gustav channeled his energy into the containment field. The field began to crack and splinter, beams of light shooting out in every direction. As he sped further and further, the containment cracked more. With a final surge of speed, the containment shattered, and the warp demolator was freed. The warp demolator fragment thrashed around wildly, its form shifting and expanding uncontrollably. Gustav activated his 3-in-1 golden body form at this moment, causing his entire being to glow with a divine radiance. The golden energy enveloped him, amplifying his strength and abilities to their peak. The warp demolator continued to grow. Its mass became humongous as it rushed into the depths of space. Gustav didn't hesitate. He blazed forward, causing his golden form, leaving a trail of light in the dark void. "Here goes nothing," Gustav muttered to himself as he pushed his speed to the limit, closing the distance between him and the warp demolator. The fragment was now an enormous entity, its energy pulsating with an almost sentient fury. Gustav maneuvered through the chaotic energy fields it emitted. As he drew closer, the warp demolator seemed to grow more haywire. Gustav gritted his teeth and pushed forward, the golden energy around him flaring brightly. Tuhush, with a burst of speed, Gustav flew directly into the heart of the warp demolator. Chapter 1533, Traveling Through the Warp Demolator. Chapter 1533, Traveling Through the Warp Demolator. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The energy around him immediately intensified, threatening to tear him apart despite the activation of his golden body underneath the sacred armor. He was engulfed in a maelstrom of chaotic energy. The rendering and contraction of the space-time continuum around him were almost overwhelming. He felt as if he were being pulled apart and compressed simultaneously, his very essence stretched across dimensions. One could imagine just how much crazier it would be if he didn't have the golden body and sacred armor. "Stay focused," he muttered to himself, gritting his teeth against the intense forces. His golden body glowed fiercely, acting as a shield against the tumultuous energy. The warp demolator surged forward with incredible speed, swallowing up all the orbital bodies in its path. Asteroids, debris, and even smaller celestial bodies were consumed. Some of the smaller and less tuger ones were immediately disintegrated into nothingness within the warp demolator's chaotic interior. Gustav could feel the immense power of the phenomenon, its hunger insatiable, and its force unstoppable. Suddenly, he felt a shift in the warp demolator's trajectory. It was aiming for planet Agon. "No," Gustav shouted, his voice echoing through the warp demolator's core. He could sense the planet in the distance. His friends were down there, watching, unaware of the imminent danger. Angie, Falco, Ildris, Eb, and Rhea stood on a high plateau on Agon, their eyes fixed on the sky. They saw the warp demolator approaching. Its massive, ashy sand-like form was no doubt an overwhelming view. Their expressions immediately turned wary. "What's happening?" Angie asked, her voice filled with worry. Falco narrowed his eyes as dark energy swirled around him. "It's coming straight for us." They all channeled their bloodline, ready to make a move despite knowing how dangerous the warp demolator was. Gustav was not about to let things get that dangerous. He put his golden body in full gear, sending radiant energy surging through the warp demolator. With a tremendous effort, Gustav steered the gargantuan entity away from Agon from its interior. The warp demolator resisted, its chaotic nature fighting against his control, but Gustav's determination was unyielding. He channeled all his strength into guiding the warp demolator's path, pulling it away from the planet and into the vastness of space. "Come on," Gustav growled as his body strained under the immense pressure. The warp demolator veered off course, and its trajectory shifted away from Agon before Gustav lost control of it. The planet was spared, the danger averted, but the effort left had taken quite the energy from Gustav's golden body. He floated within the warp demolator, and his golden body flickered as he struggled to maintain its activation. On the surface of Agon, his friends watched in awe as the warp demolator changed direction. "He did it," Angie whispered in relief. Falco nodded as a rare smile crossed his face. "I knew he would." Let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We were almost toast." Ildris' eyes never left the sky. "Stay safe, Gustav." Within the warp demolator, Gustav did his best to stabilize his golden body form and finally managed to. Okay, Gustav said to himself with a steady tone. Let's see where this takes us. The warp demolator continued to move forward, its speed unmatched by any known force. Gustav could feel the space-time continuum bending and shifting, the boundaries between dimensions becoming thin. He floated within the warp demolator, surrounded by an endless expanse of white lines that stretched infinitely in all directions. It was as if he was suspended in a void of pure dim, with no sense of up or down, no sense of time or space. The warp demolator's chaotic energy swirled around him as its destructive force constantly tried to tear him apart. Focus, he muttered to himself, causing his voice to echo in the vast emptiness. His sacred armor glowed with a bluish light as its protective barrier shielded his physical form from the warp demolator's relentless assault. Yet the pressure was immense, almost unbearable. The warp demolator's energy pressed against him from all sides, a crushing force that would have obliterated any ordinary being. But Gustav was no ordinary being. He could feel the warp demolator attacking his mental state, trying to rip his mind apart. Whispers echoed in the back of his consciousness, dark and malevolent, attempting to break his focus and sanity. He clenched his fists, causing the golden glow of his 3-in-1 golden body to intensify. The golden light emanating from his body pushed back the mental assaults, creating a barrier that shielded his mind. The whispers grew fainter, then disappeared altogether, unable to penetrate his mental defenses. Next, he felt millions of invisible hands reaching for his soul, trying to grasp and tear it from his body. The sensation was chilling, like icy fingers brushing against the core of his being. But the golden light surrounding him flared brighter, repelling the spectral hands. "You're not getting my soul, either," Gustav declared. For what felt like an eternity, Gustav drifted through the endless lines of white. The warp demolator's energy, constantly testing his limits. The light surrounding him flickered and pulsed in resilience. He knew he had to keep moving forward because he hadn't gotten to where he had to go. Gustav felt as though he was swimming through an ocean of time, with waves crashing against him from every direction. The warp demolator continued its relentless assault on his senses, but his golden body held firm as a beacon of stability in the chaos. The lines of white around him twisted and turned, creating a mesmerizing yet disorienting dance. Miss Amy wasn't kidding, Gustav muttered to himself. Time really has no meaning here. He pushed forward, determined to reach the stagnant, siderous void. His perception of time was becoming distorted, moments stretching into what felt like years, yet his golden body remained intact. He knew that despite the disorienting journey, he hadn't yet reached the 30-minute limit of his golden body form. As he flew, he began to see strange and wondrous sights. Hundreds of versions of himself appeared alongside him, each one moving in perfect synchrony. It was as if he was looking into a mirror that reflected countless possibilities, each one a different path he could have taken. "This is insane," Gustav said in amazement. "Are these alternate versions of me?" The hundreds of Gustavs moved in unison, their golden bodies shimmering with the same radiant light. It was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. As he continued, the scene shifted again. Flickering images of the universe being formed and destroyed played out before him like a cosmic slideshow. He watched as stars were born in brilliant explosions of light, only to collapse into black holes that devoured everything in their path. Galaxies spun and collided, creating breathtaking displays of cosmic power and destruction. "It's like everything is all happening at once," Gustav whispered. He felt a profound sense of insignificance as he witnessed these grand events. The warp demolator was showing him the very essence of existence, the endless cycle of birth and death that defined the universe. Despite the overwhelming nature of these visions, Gustav remained focused on his goal, Don't pay any heed to these. You have to reach the void, Gustav said to himself. As he pressed on, the white lines around him began to change. They grew thicker and more vibrant, pulsating with a strange energy that resonated with his golden body. Gustav could feel the pressure increasing. The warp demolator's attempts to break him was growing more intense. Despite the overwhelming experience, he remained calm, his senses sharp, and his will unwavering. He had been traveling through the warp demolator for what felt like centuries, yet his golden body had sustained him, keeping him grounded in the present. How did Miss Amy know that this is exactly what I'd experience? Gustav wondered aloud. He recalled how she had detailed a lot of the things he was currently experiencing in here, and found it suspicious. What else does she know that she hasn't told me? The thought lingered in his mind, but he pushed it aside. Now was not the time for this. He had to stay focused on the task at hand. As he ventured deeper into the void, the surroundings began to change. The soft, radiant light gave way to a network of intricate, glowing roots that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. Each root pulsated with a vibrant energy, intertwining and branching off into countless paths. These must be some sort of time roots, Gustav murmured as his eyes traced the complex patterns. The roots pulsed rhythmically as their energy flowed like the lifeblood of the universe. Gustav marveled at the sheer scale of it. The interconnectedness of all things laid bare before him. He reached out, his fingers brushing against one of the roots. Instantly, a flood of images and sensations washed over him. Scenes from distant pasts and possible futures flashed before his eyes. He saw ancient civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, and the endless dance of creation and destruction that defined the cosmos. Remarkable, he whispered in the heart of this loneliness. Chapter 1534, Arriving at the Stagnant, Siderous Void. Chapter 1534, Arriving at the Stagnant, Siderous Void, author's note. Unedited chapter. The warp demolator continued carrying Gustav forward non-stop. The journey felt endless, and the roots stretching on and on for what seemed like centuries. Gustav always reminded himself to stay calm and focus. His golden body would have deactivated if he had stayed in for longer than 30 minutes. As his frame got pushed in deeper, the roots began to glow brighter. Gustav could feel the pull of the void, a subtle but powerful force guiding him toward a central point. He followed the current, his instincts leading him through the ever-expanding network. Hours turned into days, days into months, and months into years. Or so it seemed. In reality, less than 30 minutes had passed since he entered the warp demolator, but the distortion of time within the void made it feel like an eternity. His journey through the roots continued, and sometimes the glowing tendrils weaved a kind of time web around him. He could sense the presence of countless moments in time. He had been carried along this path for what felt like an eternity, but yet it kept going. The pressure on his body, mind, and soul was immense, but he had managed to endure it so far. However, a growing sense of unease gnawed at him. The strain on his golden body was becoming more pronounced with each passing moment, and he could feel his energy reserves depleting. If the golden body came undone now, it would spell his end within the warp demolator's relentless, destructive currents. Could it have been up to 30 minutes already? He wondered to himself. However, since he knew well that deactivation would spell his end, he had to do whatever it took to keep it going. Gustav had been relying on the warp demolator's momentum to carry him, but now he realized he needed to take matters into his own hands. With a determined expression, he tried to move forward, pushing against the invisible currents that bound him. It felt like moving through something incredibly sticky, each inch of progress requiring immense effort. "Damn it," he grunted as his muscles strained against the resistance. "Why is it so hard to move in here?" Unbeknownst to Gustav, the The warp demolator had its own set of laws that incapacitated movement, unless it was implemented by its own flow. His attempts to move at his highest speed were met with frustrating resistance. He managed to push himself about 20 feet before he had to stop. His body trembled with exertion. "This isn't working," he said while panting heavily. "If I don't find a way to move faster, I'll run out of time." Gustav closed his eyes, trying to focus his thoughts. He had to find a way to harness enough power in the warp demolator to propel him forward. The golden body was strong, but even it had its limits. Gustav could only slow his movements, not stop them entirely, so he had to make a quick decision. Left or right, he wondered out loud. Which way leads to the stagnant Sitter's void? All the time he had spent in here, Gustav had been dragged alongside orbital bodies. Moons, planets, and even stars has been his companions here. He would have made use of the direction they were being pulled off in to make a choice, but from the look of things, some were pulled left and others right. He couldn't make his decision based off the direction the orbital bodies were being dragged in. Gustav suddenly recalled the words of Commander Urgrel of the Tark's force. He had once mentioned something about the other time candidate message saying he should go left. Could this be what he was referring to? Gustav felt this had to be it. Otherwise, it made no sense. "All right, Urgrel, I hope you're right about this." He willed himself to move left. The void's stepping boots glowed, propelling him forward and towards the left with incredible speed. The left path seemed to narrow as he progressed. The roots closed in around him, forming a tunnel-like structure. "This feels different," Gustav noted while his eyes scanned the surroundings. Unlike the other times, he didn't feel as much pressure. He only felt more pull. The warp demolator continuously pushed Gustav through the left path, and soon he was back in an area where it was all just white lines. Gustav hoped he had made the right choice and activated the void's stepping boots again. He burst forward with the speed of the void's stepping boots. The path began to close up again, narrowing and constricting, which forced him to navigate with precision since he didn't want to end up outside of the warp demolator by mistake until he reached the end of the path. Just a bit further, Gustav's eyes narrowed in focus. He surged ahead, causing the void's stepping boots to glow with each step, propelling him forward with unprecedented speed. The white lines became a blur around him, and he could feel the energy intensifying. It was as if the warp demolator itself was urging him to continue, pushing him toward his destination. Suddenly, the path opened up into a vast expanse, and Gustav found himself at the end, which happened to look like the mouth of a large beast. The beast's maw yawned open, revealing rows of jagged teeth and an abyss beyond. Before he could react, the beast swallowed him whole, and everything went dark. "Shit." Gustav's voice trailed off as he unleashed more power from his golden body form, hoping to fight his way out. Unfortunately, the darkness was impenetrable. He felt himself being pulled deeper and deeper until he was drifting away in an endless void. Gustav found himself in a surrounding filled with debris. Floating rocks and orbital bodies marked with destruction were scattered across the place. When Gustav looked around properly, he could see an uncountable lineup of planets around him. This was the stagnant Sitter's void, a part of outer space in the future that didn't exist in Gustav's time yet. Chapter 1535, Landing on a Familiar Planet. Chapter 1535, Landing on a Familiar Planet. Author's note. Unedited chapter. A lot of these planets were either shells of their former selves or their surfaces destroyed and marked with dark scorches. "This place," Gustav muttered, "it's like a graveyard of worlds. What happened here?" He floated amidst the celestial ruins, his golden body glowing faintly in the oppressive darkness. The planets, though numerous, all seemed lifeless. Some were mere husks, their surfaces cracked and barren. Others bore the scars of unimaginable battles. their landscapes torn apart by forces beyond comprehension. There is no doubt about it. This is the stagnant, siderous void, Gustav voiced, a void in time and space where the echoes of destruction linger. He could feel the void drawing every essence of happiness within him, like there was an invisible force around. It was as if the very fabric of this place fed on despair, amplifying the emptiness and sorrow of its surroundings. LOL, have to be careful even here, Gustav realized. If I lose myself here, I'll never find what I'm looking for. He glanced around, taking in the sight of thousands of abandoned and majorly destroyed planets. Gustav knew he had to find out which one was planet Humbad. Miss Amy said this wouldn't be easy, he recalled. She must have known about the mental and emotional toll this place would take. Quite terrifying. He floated towards one of the closer planets, examining its surface. The planet was covered in deep fissures with molten lava seeping from its core. The air was thick with ash, and the landscape was littered with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. This isn't it, Gustav thought. Planet Humbad. How do I tell which one it is when most of them look the same? He moved on to the next planet, a desolate wasteland with no signs of life. The ground was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the sky was a perpetually dark, stormy gray. Lightning crackled in the distance, illuminating the barren terrain. Another dead world, he muttered. How many more of these are there? He continued his search, moving from one planet to the next. Each one told a story of devastation, of once great civilizations reduced to ruins. The further he went, the heavier the weight of the void pressed upon him. This void, depsite my powerful mental fortitude. It's starting to make me feel despaired, Gustav realized. This wasn't a new feeling to him, but he hadn't felt such since over 4 years ago before he got the system. The golden body was dimming, and once it got completely deactivated, he wouldn't be able to reactivate it anytime soon, so he had to prepare to tackle the oppressiveness of the sider's void. Without its help, his mind raced with thoughts and memories, trying to piece together any clues that might lead him to his destination. Humbad, he thought. The void seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of destruction and decay. As he floated past another ruined world, he felt a pang of sadness. He flew towards it and landed on its surface. Gustav took a deep breath, feeling the strange air of the demolished planet fill his lungs. The familiarity of the place tugged at his memory, though he couldn't quite place it. The surface of the planet was a desolate wasteland, with scorched grounds and blackened structures marking the scars of ancient battles. Deep holes pockmarked the landscape, some still smoldering with the remnants of past fires. Is this it? Is this planet Humbad? He wondered aloud with an uncertain tone. He had explored countless planets already, each one a shell of its former self, and he knew this one could be just another dead end. Yet something about this place felt different. The familiarity. His void-stepping boots had been a blessing and a curse. The ability to traverse hundreds of light years in a single step was extraordinary, but it also made it easy to overshoot his destinations. Learning to control them was difficult, but he had become more adept with each use. Gustav took another cautious step forward, his eyes scanning the ruined landscape. The remnants of buildings, some still towering despite the destruction, loomed over him. He walked through what seemed to have been a city square, now a barren wasteland with only the skeletal remains of structures hinting at its former glory. This place, it feels like I've been here before, he thought. He continued to walk, the crunch of debris under his boots the only sound in the eerie silence. As he moved deeper into the ruined city, he noticed that the destruction here seemed more concentrated, more deliberate. It wasn't just the random chaos of a natural disaster. It was the calculated devastation of a war zone. What could have happened? His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the damage. He came across a particularly deep hole, its edges charred and jagged. Peering into its depths, he saw a red glow emanating from below. SS Gustav explored the surroundings more and made a few discoveries. He saw a massive circular structure, cracked and nearly completely crumbled at a particular area that looked like it used to be a road. Gustav inspected it, causing his suspicion to grow the more he looked around. Soon he recognized the planet to be Earth and couldn't hide his shock. He stood on what used to be Plankton City, now buried under ash and darkness. Does this mean? Gustav knew Earth was still okay back where he was coming from. So, what exactly did this mean? As he continued exploring, a dark, large, shadowy hand phased out of the ground and headed for him. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A burst of milky-colored light surrounded him as Gustav immediately used atomic disintegration to rip through the shadowy hand. What was that? Gustav wondered, but didn't get more time to contemplate as dark mist suddenly phased out of the ground. The hand reformed and went after Gustav again. The moment contact was made, part of Gustav's flesh turned dark. Gustav hadn't seen this coming, and his perception was slower than usual due to the void. He gritted his teeth against the pain while jumping backwards multiple times to leave a wide distance between himself and the arm. However, another shadowy arm suddenly phased out from the ground right behind him. Chapter 1536, Getting Close. Chapter 1536, Getting Close, author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav reactivated his golden body form in time, causing a radiant light to envelop him. The hand that had lunged at him burned upon contact, forcing the shadowy hand to shrink away. Gustav's darkened flesh also returned to its natural state, but Gustav could feel the lingering effects of the encounter. What was that thing? He wondered once more. Gustav had destroyed it before, and yet it returned, so he wasn't sure it was gone for good even after getting rid of it again. His instincts proved correct when he was attacked again, this time by multiple shadowy hands emerging from the ground. They moved with eerie coordination, each one trying to latch onto him and spread their corruption. Gustav unleashing a powerful burst of energy that disintegrated the hands. But even as they fell apart, they began to reform, their dark essence refusing to be vanquished. Gustav continuously did his best to escape physical contact with the shadowy hands. Using his atomic disintegration, he managed to temporarily dissipate many of them, but they always reformed no matter what he did. Acquisition has been activated. Gustav activated acquisition to see if it could be of any help in the situation. Unfortunately, nothing happened. The hands still came at him. Gustav guessed that these hands didn't count as beings with supernatural abilities. Realizing that his efforts were futile, Gustav decided to flee the surroundings and leave the shadowy entities alone for now. This isn't getting me anywhere, he thought with a slight look of frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. I need to find out more about what's going on here. Gustav activated his void-stepping boots again, vanishing from the spot and reappearing on the other side of the planet. He continued to explore the decomposed remains of what used to be Earth. As he moved through the ruins, he saw more of the dark, shadowy entities. Some took the form of hands, like the one that attacked him earlier, while others appeared as amorphous blobs of darkness that seemed to absorb all light around them. They moved sluggishly as if they were drawn to any semblance of life or energy. These things are everywhere, Gustav muttered to himself, watching one of the shadowy blobs engulf a piece of debris, turning it into darkened ash. What could have caused this? How did Earth and possibly other planets end up like this? He continued to theorize as he moved. Could this be the after effects of that? Gustav had a number of guesses, but his mind main hinged on a particular one. His thoughts were interrupted by another shadowy hand emerging from the ground. He quickly void-stepped away, avoiding contact and reappearing a safe distance from the entity. I can't let them touch me again. He decided to explore other planets in the surrounding void, hoping to find more clues. Using his void stepping boots, he began to traverse the vast expanse of space, moving from one desolate planet to another. Each one bore the same signs of destruction and shadowy infestation. Their surfaces were scorched and marked with deep craters. Every planet is the same, he observed, standing on the surface of a particularly large planet. It's like a plague has swept through this entire region, leaving nothing but darkness and decay in its wake. As he explored, he noticed that the shadowy entities varied in form and behavior. Some were aggressive, like the hands that had attacked him, while others seemed more passive, simply existing in their darkened state. He also observed that the entities seemed to be drawn to any source of light or energy, which explained why they had attacked him. I can't waste any more time, he thought as his eyes scanned the desolate landscape. I need to find planet Humbad. Gustav had looked around enough to get a general idea of what caused all of this, but this was the future. It hadn't happened yet, and there was still hope. What he needed to do now more than ever was find planet Humbad, but the problem of which direction to head in remained. He suddenly got an idea and opened the system panel. From the system panel, he decided to check his 5 years quests, or specifically, the one he hadn't completed yet. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress 89.10/100%. Gustav noticed that the percentage fluctuated as he moved. He took a step toward the west, watching the progress decrease to 89. 5%. Turning to the northeast, the percentage climbed back up to 89. 15%. Northeast it is, he muttered to himself while taking off into the air with a burst of speed. The void stepping boots activated, propelling him forward with incredible velocity. He flew through the stagnant Sidrus void, causing the remnants of destroyed planets and moons to blur past him. The journey was arduous, with Gustav encountering more of the dark, shadowy entities along the way. They seemed to be drawn to his presence, reaching out with their tendrils in an attempt to ensnare him. Despite the burst of speed from the void stepping boots, which gave him the ability to travel hundreds of light years in just an instant, he would still encounter the shadowy entities. They're everywhere. Gustav noticed that sometimes they even appeared in space, above the decimated planets. He flew over the charred remains of what had once been thriving cities, now nothing more than crumbling ruins swallowed by darkness. Each new planet he encountered seemed to share the same fate, a grim reminder of the void's corrupting influence. As he flew, Gustav kept an eye on the system panel, monitoring the progress percentage. It was slow, but it was increasing, guiding him ever closer to his goal. Gustav felt like he had been moving for hours already, but who knew if this part of space was bound by the normal laws of time? For all he knew, it could have been months already. Nevertheless, he kept soaring through the stagnant, Sidrus void. His focus remained steadfast on the system panel in his vision, the progress bar slowly creeping upwards. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 98.00/100%. Just a bit more, Gustav muttered to himself, his voice barely audible in the vacuum of space. As the percentage reached 98, Gustav's surroundings began to distort. He found himself caught in a peculiar phenomenon. The fabric of space-time seemed to twist and ripple around him. Every time he surged forward, he was inexplicably transported to a different location within the void. Locate Dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 95.00/100%. What is this? Gustav frowned, attempting to comprehend the nature of this spatial anomaly. He tried again, using his lightning blitz to increase his speed, hoping to break through whatever was hindering his progress. In a flash, he found himself somewhere else, the scenery unchanged, but the coordinates different. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 94.00/100%. The progress percentage reduction was particularly frustrating. No matter what I do, it's the same result, Gustav muttered. He paused for a moment, hovering in the void, and pondered his situation. If the direct approach isn't working, perhaps there's another way. Gustav decided to try a different tactic. He reached out with his perception, extending it as far as he could within the constraints of the stagnant, siderous void. Despite the oppressive environment, he focused on sensing any anomalies or disturbances that might explain the warping space. Unfortunately, he couldn't really pick up on much, but he could tell that the spatial anomaly was like a wall that extended far deep into the stagnant, siderous void. One thing he knew about walls was that they always had an end. With this thought in mind, Gustav decided to go around it. The void's stepping boots glowed, and he took a step forward. Threary, he instantly reappeared, 5,000 light years away from his initial position. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 91.00/100%. The progress percentage had reduced by so much, but Gustav could still sense the spatial anomaly around, so he stepped forward once more. This time he reappeared 10,000 light years away. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 84.00/100%. Gustav couldn't sense the spatial anomaly anymore, and immediately turned to the side before surging forward with speed. He inputted more energy into the void stepping boots this time, and crossed a distance of more than 10,000 light years in a single second. Fortunately, he was not sent reeling back this time. Progress 92. 10%. He let out a sigh of relief after seeing the progression. He was on the right track. He continued forward, watching the percentage steadily climb. Almost there, Gustav thought. He kept pushing forward, and soon he found himself in an area where planets were few and far between. The void seemed to stretch endlessly, but there was a subtle difference in the atmosphere. As Gustav moved further, the number of planets in the surroundings kept reducing. That you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.